So I'll present you and then come and sit with you. I've learned that from Naomi. Where's Naomi? Not here. So first we have with us MONTRA ELLIS, Senior Director of Product Strategy at UKG. MONTRA is also a board member of the Velocity Network Foundation, part of the secret cabal that takes all the decisions in this network, and we love her. We also have Alex KAPLAN, worldwide leader, Learning Credential Network, IBM. Alex is one of the most, to me, Alex is one of the most knowledgeable and engaging thought leaders in this space, and I always learn something new every time I listen to him. And last but not least, Mark LEUBA, VP Product, One EdTech, formerly known as IMS Global. Mark is a learning technology expert leading programs for innovative organizations that seek to empower individuals' mobility and equity in work and education, which is exactly what we're doing here today. So welcome, everybody. I'm going to start. So we're here to talk about from local pilots to mass adoption of verifiable career credentials, because we've seen in the last few years quite a few siloed pilots, small experiments with verifiable credentials, and it's definitely time to move to mass adoption. But first, what I want to ask you, and we'll start from MONTRA, Alex, is to help us imagine a world where verifiable credentials really, really paint a picture, like as vivid, because people say adoption, people say interoperability, people say a lot of stuff. But, you know, I'm a simple man. So try to help me imagine a world where verifiable credentials are adopted at mass, right? What is the experience of individuals? What is the experience of organizations? What is the experience of license issuers, of universities, of learning vendors, right? So let's start with our esteemed board member.
So I look at it from the perspective of, if we think about this ultimate world, it's really consumer driven, right? So the idea is we start with employees as the consumer. They're really kind of the product here, right? And we should be caring and feeding for that product. And so the idea is, I ideally see that from throughout the employee life cycle. So during the initial talent acquisition and intake, so recruiting, onboarding, we definitely are seeing those credentials being issued and being used as part of that process. And then, of course, internally, as they kind of go through talent mobility, transboarding, all of those things that you do within talent development, that they're continuing to feed into that wallet, so that they're actually thinking about this as an ongoing sense of putting more things in their suitcase that they can take with them. So really kind of thinking about decomposing those credentials into specific skills and capabilities. And so that those skills and capabilities are transferable. And so what I also see is that we're all basically speaking the same language, and that we have the same taxonomy, or at least a translation code of what that means across industries and organizations. So that, I'll use an example, if I'm talking to a nice nurse practitioner about this possibility, that person does not freak out because I've used the wrong term as I'm speaking about credentials, because they immediately get up in arms about that. And I think from my perspective, I see also universities have kind of gotten over the kind of ideal of, what's the word? How do I say this in the nicest way?
We're not doing nice today.
I would like to see universities really kind of enter this in a truly equitable fashion, because right now universities don't really have an incentive to some extent, especially universities that are on the kind of top tier universities, because if the skills kind of traditional or the credentials that are from that organization basically map to everything else, then what's different about my university? So what's the difference between Harvard and UT and Rice and, you know, whatever college happens to be there? So I actually see universities getting on board with this and actually really thinking about not only what those credentials mean, but the decomposition of those credentials into verifiable skills as well. I see this as a skills conversation throughout the pipeline of an employee's life cycle.
Fantastic. So two comments here. So it was 4 years ago when I said, hey, in a few years, it didn't happen yet, but in a few years, if I'm an employee, right, and I come to you as an employer considering to work for you, one of the questions that I'm asking is, would you be able to issue verifiable credentials to me attesting to all the good stuff that I'm doing for your organization? And if the answer would be no, then I would say, okay, so this does not contribute to my employability and to my career. So I'm going to do a different employer in that. So hopefully, that corresponds to the vision that you've mentioned. And with regards to universities, we have people here that can attest to that, but 90, not the top 5%, but 95% of university are struggling with enrollment rates. And one of the questions that they've been asking themselves is, why is that happening? And the reason is that the portability to the job market is questionable. So while we've heard of a lot of big gap that needs to be, big chasm that needs to be crossed, there are very strong drivers for universities, not the top 5%, which I agree. But a lot of the universities are struggling and need to find a way to make their education more portable to the job market. Alex.
So I'll take it in a little bit of a different direction. I think that this is really about making it easier for people to navigate their careers. So I think about it as a cradle to career initiative. And it's really hard for people to know, given the skills that they have and the work that they've done, what the options are for them and how to proceed, really at every stage of life, right? And so I think that as you increase the quality and the integrity of the data that's available, the more we can do with that data to really personalize it to an individual. And that's especially true for communities that have been historically disadvantaged in terms of having access to this kind of a system. And if you look at it on a global basis, it's even more prevalent kind of problem. So I think that we can get to the world where it's just easier to connect people with jobs. And this technology is a critical component to it. The other thing that I'm really excited about with it, and again, as the quality of the information goes up, is to actually flip the entire paradigm here. It's really hard for me to understand why people have to go apply for jobs as opposed to jobs go and find them. And so I think that in the future, we can push information to people saying, hey, I noticed you shared all this information about yourself. Well, did you know that we have job openings or we have opportunities for you to build your skills, and would you like to learn more about that? That way the burden shifts off of them. And it's very much like, the experience we have with Netflix or Amazon, which suggests, well, I see you bought this, well, why don't you buy that? Or I see that you've watched this movie, maybe you'd like to see this kind of TV show. So I think that building this infrastructure is a really critical dimension to it. But ultimately, what we really want to do is we just want to make it easier for people to navigate their careers and to have really high quality information, make the process way more efficient for everybody, and bring in and be much more inclusive in terms of the population of people who have access to these kind of opportunities.
But I want to challenge what you just said. So enabling people to be discovered, right, can be done today, right? People have very, very elaborated LinkedIn profiles, and we can, approach them and say, based on what you say about yourself, are you interested in hearing about this job opportunity or this project that they've just opened for us? And it's not happening. So why do you think is that?
Well, it's a very fractured market, right? This is a multi-sided market problem. And so you have this highly fractured market. So what you said is true if you're willing to do it 17 different times across every available job board that's out there. And people just give up on it. So yes, it's true, but it's also incredibly inefficient in terms of like making that happen. So people just don't do it. The other part of the problem is that the quality of data that's available to provide career pathing is fairly poor overall. And so like if you go in and you fill out, and which I've done because I like to play around with it, you fill out the profile, upload your resume, and ask the system to give you guidance. I would tell you every time I've ever done that, the results back are they're very, very weak for me. And so I don't even bother to try again. And so until you can solve the data integrity problem and you can get much higher personalized quality out of the recommendations, you're just not going to use them. And until you can solve the complexity problem and the fractured nature of the marketplace, it's just too much of a lift for people. And that's why people don't do it. So, I think the beauty of what all you are doing in terms of that infrastructure layer and trying to provide a sort of common layer and a common theme, well, you can't reduce that fractured nature of the market or the complexity without having a national infrastructure and actually a global infrastructure that can do it. And in addition to that, you can't solve the data quality problems without having verification and the really great work that Credential Engine and others are doing in order to increase the quality and the quantity of data.
Mark.
So first of all, I want to thank you and congratulate you, Dror, and Eitan and the team on a really great conference.
Thank you.
I personally really enjoyed it. On the individual experience level, what a person knows and can do has great value. And up until now, we have not been able to treat those achievements with the respect, really, that they deserve. So now that we have digital credentials that can be managed by an individual to achieve their personal and professional goals, we have the beginning of the tools to really change the dynamic, to Alex's point and to your own, to put the individual in the driver's seat. So one of our members, One EdTech, many of you may not know that what we do, we are the publisher of the Open Badge Standard and a digital credential called the Comprehensive Learner Record. We're a nonprofit standards body, 900 organizations are members, and we work together with our membership to develop an open, trusted, and innovative ecosystem. And credentials are a big part of that. And we've been working since 2016, as you know, when Mozilla first approached us and asked us to take over the Open Badge Standard. And we were doing work with University of Maryland in a digital transcript project at that time. And they were a very early mover in the CLR. And they did research with a group of master's degree students who had gone through a competency-based program, which was also new, and their information was captured on this portal with a CLR. And the response from the individual students, and these are master's degree students, so you're thinking, okay, they're motivated, they're driven, they're very capable and confident. The biggest outcome from that research was that the level of confidence that the individual gained from seeing what they know and can do in a very concise and well-organized way. So imagine that in mid and even low-skilled employees, right? So the level of pride and confidence that these tools will give to the individuals, I don't think we even know yet. So our entire membership is so totally behind this work because we do believe that, the learner experience is central. And The implementations can certainly be very equitable. There was mention yesterday about the ability to reduce bias by virtue of some of the funneling strategies and so forth. Some of the software that we've developed for experimentation allows you to anonymize your credentials in such a way that, again, furthers this idea of bias reduction. So we're very optimistic about the potential that this is going to have for individuals.
That's amazing. I've never thought of that angle, that having the primary authority asserting facts about you would give you the self-efficacy to go and just get the next job. It's mind-blowing. I mean, thank you for that. It's mind-blowing to me.
Actually, can I make a comment related to that?
Please.
So I think that's critical. I want to hone in a little bit, especially when we start to talk about frontline workers in many different ways. And we traditionally do not pay attention to the skill set because for the most part, there's really not any unskilled jobs. Most of us can't go out and walk into someone else's job and know how to do it, no matter what that is, whether that is, working at McDonald's, working at various hospitality places. Most of us just can't walk in and know how to do it. So there's a skill there. And I think that elevation of understanding what those skills are and understanding the kind of level of that skill is really important. And it gives credibility to people. And I think it takes away that idea that everyone who is an hourly worker or blue collar worker wants to be a white collar worker. That's just not true, right? Some people are very happy, and quite frankly, some blue collar workers make more money than we do. So it's just one of those things I think that's really important. Thanks.
So essentially, what you're saying, both of you, what you're saying is that to have intelligence, you need language, and to know myself in a way that would allow me to navigate my career based on my skills and interests, I need to know and name the skill set and credentials that I've earned. And most people, white collar, blue collar, they don't have that language. They don't know what they know. They don't know what they own. So that's an angle I've never thought of.
And the progression of skill development, right? The gamification aspect where you're motivated because you're beginning to see the results of your hard work. And that's also a very important aspect of achieving credentials.
So while I'm tempted to dive deeper into this rabbit hole, I have a job to do. Let's take the two key stakeholders, relying parties / employers / anyone that get credentials from an individual and want to verify them, and then the individual is the other stakeholder. And my question to you is, as we move forward to mass adoption, what is the one utility for each of those audiences that we should put front and center and focus on to gain global adoption? Is it self-sovereignty for the individual? Is it privacy? Is it other things? Is it just the ability to be more efficient in your verification processes if you're a relying party? So shorten the cycle. What would be the game changers for these audiences that we need to put front and center?
Well, I'm happy to start from the employer perspective. It's really pretty simple. We just need better quality information about people. I mean, when IBM receives 5 million applications a year for its open jobs. So how do we deal with 5 million applications? Well, we're doing it all through artificial intelligence, and we're narrowing it down to a list of people who look like their skills align to our open jobs. And we're at the point now in IBM where 50% of our jobs don't require a college degree. So we're a skills-based hirer, and we just need better quality information. Resumes are notoriously bad, and that's not the fault of the individual. Job descriptions are notoriously bad. And so that all ends up on a recruiter's desk, right? And they have to look at what is the job? What do I think the job is telling me? I need to look for skills. And I have to look at the applicant and go, gee, do those people match? And so, we can sort of get into the ballpark of it. The problem with being in the ballpark, there's like a lot of room in a ballpark and all sorts of seats. And we really need to get into the stands and get into the individual seat. And it all comes back to the quality of the data and information that's being provided.
Otherwise, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? Otherwise, it's garbage in, garbage out.
Well, it's
AI, shmai, but the data. It starts with the data, right?
But I mean, this is a historical. It hasn't. AI is just the latest manifestation, but it's always been based upon the quality of the information. And what we know from our own internal research in terms of how people are successful in their jobs in the first year, we've got a pretty good idea of what the candidate profile looks like for somebody to be successful. So we use the data that's available, but anything that will improve the data that's available is a really good thing. Now, this becomes particularly important in parts of the world and amongst communities where getting at that skills-based data is way more difficult, right? So I have lots of credentials. It's sort of easy for people to sort of guess what I can do. But there are a lot of people who really, have done really important work, but it's not captured in any kind of a way. So they get excluded from the candidate pool. So we're all about raise the quality of information so you've got a richer candidate pool.
MONTRA?
I'm going to lean towards, once again, the employee, and I really think it's self-sovereignty, right? It's the idea of I own kind of my own digital footprint, right? And I think, I run into this even when we've done research with customers, and it's interesting because the customer believes that they own that, right? So the employer often, and will make mandates about how a particular employee is supposed to use data. But I think there's an educational component to that, right? Often when my team goes out and we do validation studies, there is a disconnect across the board around what is possible, like the art of the possible. And quite often, what we find is participants in these studies don't believe in the art of the possible that exists right now. They all think it's the Jetsons, right? And so they'll often say, well, I don't think that XYZ can do this. So I think it's about the self-sovereignty and around the education, which should start really early, right? I think it should be starting at the high school level, and that we should kind of inundate people with kind of thinking about how those skills, capabilities that you have from the time you get your first, high school job, whether that's at Astroworld or food service place or CVS, how does that feed into that credentialing and basically continue to kind of, once again, fill that bucket, fill that kit of your tool set, so to speak.
So I want to challenge this. Really? Self-sovereignty? There was the CEO that told me to my face, no one cares about privacy.
So I will argue that privacy doesn't exist. That boat left. And people waved as it walked away, right? But I think people still have the perception that they have privacy. I don't know if that's the same. I don't tie that with self-sovereignty, though, right?
That was where I'm heading.
It's about mastering my own destiny. That's the difference.
I like it.
So we've been focusing on breaking into HR tech, frankly. We have a project called Wellspring. It's actually a multi-year initiative where we develop demonstration software to show how these digital credentials can make better hiring possible. And that's the root of the question that I asked, I think, was Shelley, about the availability of analysis of algorithmic decision-making and ranking based on the incoming structured data. So our research has demonstrated that there can be very marked improvement in the decision-making, in the funneling, to identify those candidates that are capable, but for one reason or another are getting lost in the pile of 5 million resumes. So the promise of these verifiable digital credentials to have a really significant impact in the efficiency and the quality of the hiring process at all levels, obviously short of the executive level perhaps, is absolutely there. So this past year, we do research as part of the Wellspring Initiative. And this past year, we spent better part of the year interviewing HR tech companies to identify how well positioned they were to adopt verifiable credentials and skill frameworks. And it was very sobering. The groups that we spoke with covered about half the market, and the information was sobering. The platform companies are not at all well positioned to accept verifiable credentials, digital credentials, actually even paper credentials of many kinds, nor are they managing skills data in any kind of really strategic way. And so there's a lot to be done in the HR world in order to be able to take this vast supply of quality credentials, in many cases, and have that information processed within the HR space. We're determined to work with, hopefully, people in this room to get those demonstration systems. I mean, the HCA example, that's great progress, and others. So we are breaking through. There is cracks in the wall, but much more to be done. The roadmaps are tough to break into because digital credentials are not on top of mind for the HR leadership or the strategic talent acquisition leadership. It's not top of mind, so it doesn't make it to the top of the priority for roadmaps. So that's a rough challenge.
That's a good segue to challenges. So my next question is, what is the biggest challenge for mass adoption, right? Like real global, worldwide adoption. Is it, and is it priorities? Is it usability? Is it regulatory support that is maybe missing? What is the mega challenge?
My point of view is raising awareness to generate the demand, the pull.
I'm not a big believer in awareness. I'm a big believer in immediate value. Do you see immediate value for the hiring managers?
You have to demonstrate that value, and that's why Wellspring exists, is to demonstrate for people. And there are other examples that are going on right now. Totally agree. We need to shout from the mountaintops the incremental benefits that we're starting to see and get the word out.
Alex?
I think it's simple. Show me. I mean, there's not a single place you can go in the world today and see this in action in terms of the totality of what we're trying to do for the individual or the employer. So there's a very large community, yourselves included, many others across the learning and employment record space, around the transition to a skills-denominated economy. There's a lot of brilliant minds working on this problem. But I was on Capitol Hill a few months ago talking to staff in the House and the Senate, and they said, oh yeah, we get it. We're totally on board. We love it. Can you show me? I want to see it on your phone. I can't demonstrate it. It's really hard to get mass adoption when you can't actually demonstrate something to people. I think it's one of those situations where everybody's like primed and ready and would love to have it. But remember, 99% of organizations and individuals just want to subscribe to something. They don't want to invent it. They don't want to create it. They don't want to have to work on it. And so when somebody eventually comes out with like a real scaled use of the entirety of the concept, not just one individual piece, but when you could go into, I don't know, Allegheny County in Pennsylvania, or the state of North Dakota, or Alabama, the state of Alabama, and I can log into my phone and I can see, oh, those are my skills, those credentials are verified, those are jobs that I'm eligible for, here's places I could get training to augment the skills so I could get the next job, and you can just see it. It's that simple. I think people will immediately move to it. Now, and then you got to be able to measure the outcomes, right? All that sort of work. Like, does it really make any difference or not? But to me, show me is the biggest obstacle right now for adoption, which is a great place to be, because when I started with this, nobody understood any of it, just like with you, right? Now everybody's like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. So what do we do next? And the truth is, we really can't point them to any scalable, right, going from the title of this, to any scaled use of thousands and tens of thousands of people with employers, with education institutions, with government agencies, all working where you can actually see it and you can navigate it. I think once we can demonstrate it, I think people will adopt it.
MONTRA?
I agree with both of those questions and both those answers to some extent, but I think it literally is the massive scale, right? We can build the technology for it, but we still have to do a whole kind of sea change around kind of behaviors and expectations. And I think that we're not going to solve that with technology, that we're going to solve that with kind of people using products, having the availability, having the kind of being able to prove it, but it's also giving people the idea that there's kind of equity in these skills. So I'll use the example of there's data that we have out there. There's some exceptions where when people have the opportunity to choose someone who has equitable skills, background, so on and so forth, they still lean towards the person with a credentialed university degree, right? Even if that person with that degree does not meet the mark. And that's basically the hiring managers, that's their behavior. So you have to unpack that behavior. You have to unpack all of the things around when we start thinking about credentials. We got to unpack the attitudes around higher learning. We got to unpack the attitudes of how we break these things down within employers and how we communicate it and how we share data across employers and we share data across HCM vendors, right? And so all of those things need to be unpacked. I think that there's kind of a massiveness to it, that kind of creating that one slice through that really shows that demonstrability is a challenge.
I'm a big believer in the numbers game, right? And I think that, I mean, with the things this audience is planning, no new things, just things that are in the making, we would have roughly 10 million people with good verifiable credentials and wallets late next year. Just the thing that we are aware of that are in the makings with this group, I think that would tilt the equation. Right?
Well, it'll help, right? But it is a multi-sided market problem.
But
right?
then when I talk to vendors that are on the rooster side or the chicken or egg, I've lost track, right? I talk to their CEOs and they say, you know what? When you'll have this is when I'll mobilize real resources. So we need to start somewhere. And I think that what this unbelievable community is doing is seeding the market and creating the weight that will tilt the equation. And this is why I think that for Horizon 1, right, our job should be issue, and this is what this community is working on. And you've seen this builders with a big background screening vendor in play, right? They see millions of people every year. Each of them will be offered with verifiable credentials, attesting to their entire history, trusted by other relying parties because they were accredited to do that with very rigorous methodology that this governance structure, right, has put in place. You will hear tomorrow from an assessment vendor, skills assessment. Later today, sorry. Tomorrow you're done with us. So later today, from an assessment vendor that administer 40 million assessments every year. 40 million people would be offered to have their assessment as portable, reusable, verifiable, self-sovereign, credential that they can use, right? That would create the mass, right? You will not hear from credentialing platforms that have a history of hundreds of millions of valuable credentials that will be migrated in the next few months to be self-sovereign, verifiable credentials. That would create the mass. And I hope that my next conversation with these CEOs would be, hey, how do we get on board? Rather than, come to it, don't call us. Okay. Yeah, I really want to thank you. It's been amazing. I would spend, personally, I would spend another couple of hours with you guys. You've been fantastic. Thank you.